T'Challa the Black Panther. In the Challenge Day Machinery Chapter 1, Malta Island. Abner Little was shot in the head by the visitor to the vault of Cecil Rhodes. The blood of the vault's curator splattered like a bizarre splash painting over the box that the visitor had wheeled inside. The killer ran to the center of the vault like a wolf to where the Great Bird of Zimbabwe statue stood. He attached a bomb to the bejeweled artifact, then he returned to the elevator and it took him to the surface that was 9,000 miles above the vault. Wakanda. Despite everyone telling T'Challa that high admiration was the reason no one challenged for the Black Panther mantle in the annual ceremony, T'Challa did not see it that way. People opting out of their right to change the national leader was worrisome to T'Challa because it signaled to him that the populace found the system futile. He had to find out if people were afraid of his fighting dominance, the death warrant nature of the Black Panther's job, or that the job made no difference to them. He did one more slow handstand push-up. Afterwards he flipped onto his legs to end the training routine in a room at the administration tower. 3 hours later he floated down the vent of the dormant volcano that housed the nation's secondary military laboratory. Since the world was daily divided up by the political powers of the AI nation Bilderberg and the Krakoan mutants, Wakanda's military edge was needed more than ever to shield it from the new global juggernauts. Ironically, the war satellites that were built in the volcano and were above the country came under attack from a mysterious vessel based on the alert that came to T'Challa on his Black Panther mask's computer interface. He delegated the investigation to his sister Shuri, the head of the commando unit. Another alert was a request from Rwanda's president to send one of his citizens to Wakanda for urgent medical care. T'Challa gave his approval for the opening of the border to receive the patient. Then another message pertained to the United Nations wanting Wakanda to join a coalition of human settlements in the planetoid area just beyond Pluto. T'Challa told them no. The time came for the scientists in the facility to demonstrate their latest machine that was based on the language of speaking drums. The Kale machine's purpose was to allow communication between a combat strike team that traveled on the supernatural plane and a command base on the physical plane. Normally only a mystic could communicate simultaneously with the physical world while he was in the unseen one. The other problem was that teleportations, invisibility suits, and quarter-ahead time speed manipulations were now easily discernible by sophisticated technologies that were imported from alien worlds. Those technologies were now on the open arms market. Using a mini-hadron collider, the scientists had punched a doorway into a thin piece of the supernatural world. Then they placed large brown cubes inside of the area to build a controlled environment called Ngaida. T'Challa along with a team went into the Ngaida. The team wore night vision goggles and oxygen masks. They walked on the cubes for a few meters. The doorway that they passed through closed and then the demonstration commenced. T'Challa estimated that the entire armed forces apparatus would have to be overhauled for a new type of warfare on the supernatural plane. After the demonstration was over, he told the scientists that he was impressed. The space station New Switzerland above Neptune. Kissinger had a major problem. He wanted to have an order in place for when humans moved away from the Earth to the solar system, but his brothers believed that they could retake the Earth from Bilderberg and the mutants. Kissinger believed that the civil war between him and his brothers was the reason for the rise of the mutants and the AI nation. He told his brothers this and they rebuffed him for it like spoiled children. The brothers based their objectives on what came out of the Club of Rome's WORLD-3 computer, a machine that Kissinger adamantly called compromised equipment. He gladly left the WORLD-3 computer in Switzerland back on Earth and instead brought the other Swiss institution, the Bank for International Settlements, and its gold bullion to the space station to control the flow of money in the solar system. The vault of Cecil Rhodes, with its collection of selected seals and symbols of power over the supernatural, was owned by his brothers, so Kissinger used the vault to send a message to them that he could have the bedrock of their power blown up at any time. His brothers retaliated by framing New Switzerland for the attack on Wakanda's satellites with a commandeered ship from the space station. Kissinger sighed and swiveled his office chair away from the window view of Neptune. Kissinger recalled when his brothers and him had given through the veil of ignorance method permission to a low-level oath member to obtain all of Wakanda's vibranium even though Adolf Hitler had failed to do so for them previously. That was a mistake because it roused the isolated nation to become a never-ending problem for Kissinger. A mythical and unknown Wakanda was far better than the international one led by T'Challa, which threatened spheres of control and unipolarity. Kissinger paused in his thoughts and got out of his office chair. He walked to the T-Rex skull fossil that was the wall and stared at it. Wakanda might be the answer to resolving this civil war, said Kissinger. An aspect of the one world order that Kissinger and his brothers sought was that nations like America, United Kingdom, Russia, Japan, and China would have national leaders and technocrats subservient to their agenda. It did not matter if the leaders were democratically elected or were military dictators. The Great Agenda's purpose was to have a centrally controlled militaristic planet much like the alien Kree and Shi'ar empires. This one-world government could then enter into talks with the alien empires. Unfortunately, the agenda found itself in problems which meant that the aliens met a rambled bunch of humans with differing objectives. The recent events in the cosmos that caused humans to retreat back into their solar system had given Kissinger an opportunity to get the settlements on the edge of Pluto to form into a single government. But Kissinger needed his brothers for the agenda to have a chance of success. Wakanda's peculiar Challenge Day system would work well to end the Civil War because it allowed the natural Alpha to take all the spoils of victory. The phone on his wrist rang and he answered it. "The Black Panther is in New Switzerland, sir, specifically in the Davos section," said the caller. "Tell White Wolf to explain to the Black Panther that there has been a misunderstanding," said Kissinger. Chapter 2. T'Challa smelt the scent of his spiritual blood brother White Wolf as soon as he sneaked into the space station, and he went straight for him. Abraham Hunter aka White Wolf was a bearded mercenary-built man with family ties to the Vatican. "T'Challa, your stealth work is lousy," said White Wolf as he faced a seemingly invisible Black Panther. T'Challa decloaked to reveal his ceremonial Black Panther uniform. "You are working for Hydra now," said T'Challa. "I am a consultant," said White Wolf. "I will cut to the chase. New Switzerland played no part in the attack on Wakanda. The ship with our registration credentials was stolen. The attack was carried out by the Roundtable of 13 to aggravate you. I am still going to blast this space station into oblivion," said T'Challa. "You cannot do that because there are asteroid field miners, farmers on Mars and tour operators around Uranus relying on the cryptocurrency that passes through the Bank for International Settlements blockchain. Do you really want an entire solar system to rise up against Wakanda? The examples that you have given are all in negotiations to be bought out by Rahcon, which is a Hydra-affiliated corporation that ironically has headquarters in this space station," replied T'Challa. "Tell your boss that he has 3 hours to evacuate the women and children." "The United Nations made New Switzerland a neutral zone," said White Wolf. "Time is ticking away, Hunter. 3 hours is all you have," said T'Challa. Next story, The Kissinger Report. T'Challa the Black Panther. In the Kissinger Report Chapter 1, the train passed beneath T'Challa's feet and each of the compartments were decorated in stylish art patterns which made the train resemble a rainbow snake. The railroad junction bell drowned out the sound of the rushing train. Then the tracks changed direction and diverted the train to the next village. T'Challa leapt from the lighting pole and into the community that the train passed through. There were 50 people living in the area and it was the smallest settlement population in Wakanda. Politically, the settlement was under the municipality of the Minor clan, but like most of the country, the inhabitants were a mixture of other clans. T'Challa smelled the woody scent of the oil used to clean the high-powered rifles that were in each of the homes that he walked by. Soon the people were in the street to greet the leader of the country. "Do the sound dampers to block out the noise of the trains work?" asked T'Challa. "Sometimes they shut down, but we get them back up and working," replied one of the residents. Does the local council know? Asked T'Challa. We don't bother them with such petty things, replied another resident. T'Challa left the community after 40 minutes had passed, and much like the 6 other settlements he had visited that afternoon, there were things that were not being reported to the administration online network, hence he did not get the full picture of what the citizens lived through in the reports from the state agencies. But he got a clearer understanding from the community tours. T'Challa sat on the top of the latest train that had passed the settlement. He received a message from his sister about an investigation into the space station called New Switzerland that was above the planet Neptune. High levels of magical energy had engulfed the space station, and a trace had revealed that the magic originated from the island of Malta that was in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. T'Challa thought about his citizens and how he shielded them from the machinations of actors like the New Switzerland who did not operate in the best interest of Wakanda. Chapter 2 T'Challa arrived at the home of the goddess Calypso on Malta. He knew about her because of the confrontations she had with his allies Spider-Man and Daredevil. She was known to conceal the great mysteries of the island. Her home comprised of several houses that were on top of an underground grotto. The men and women in and around the houses were Calypso's servants. The evening was particularly hot and foreboding, which made the Black Panther more curious about what was taking place on the island. He walked up the very narrow street that was like an urban valley because of the sheer scale of the houses that bordered it. "Proceed no further," said a woman who appeared behind T'Challa. "Calypso, what are you guarding on this island that has involved my nation?" he asked without turning around, having sensed her divinity. "You address me without respect, O famous Black Panther. If your arrival was not expected, I would surely have you punished for such insolence," said Calypso. "Expected by whom?" asked T'Challa. The door to one of the houses on the left opened and Abner Little alighted from it. "I'll take it from here, my goddess," said Abner Little. T'Challa was skeptical of the halfling who wore a beaded necklace and several silver rings on his fingers. "You have changed in appearance, but that scoundrel nature is still present," said the Black Panther. "You know me so well," said Abner Little. "Wakanda does not want any dealings with New Switzerland. We recognized the false flag attack on our satellites and showed restraint," said T'Challa. "Unfortunately, old friend, I had cause to run a SYOP on that space station because someone from there put a bullet in my head." "SYOP? I sent a copy of you to the space station to ruffle Kissinger's feathers," replied Abner Little. T'Challa walked over to the halfling and bared the claws from the gloves of the Black Panther ceremonial combat uniform. "So you have involved me in your Brotherhood war. What were you thinking? To strike fear into Kissinger's heart, since he is hardly troubled by most things except for a straightforward battle with Wakanda. He spoke about it at our meetings for years." "Don't worry about it because it will all blow over soon," replied Abner Little. T'Challa regretted that he was the one who contacted Abner Little in the Swiss Alps all those years ago when he was curious about the Brotherhood that used nations as pawns in their schemes because he wanted to know their plans for Wakanda. T'Challa reached for the halfling, but his arm was held by Calypso, who had suddenly reappeared. She was an ebony woman with a thin crown on her head and her grip was strong. "Stop, stop, please stop," said Abner Little. "There is no need to fight. Odysseus and Craven the hunter could not break free from my hold." "Do you care to try?" asked Calypso as she stared into T'Challa's eyes. "Come on inside, T'Challa, I want to show you the Ultron project," said Abner Little. Calypso released the Black Panther and he went into the house, which turned to a chamber in the Cecil Rhodes vault. T'Challa recognized the friezes that were similar to the ones underneath his alma mater Oxford University, which was also a recipient of Cecil Rhodes' generosity. "The Brotherhood is going to bring Ultron back to reign in the spread of the Bilderberg Nation and indirectly hijack the Nimrod initiative that will curb the mutant nation of Krakow. It is a stroke of genius," said Abner Little, and he clapped. On the wall was a mural which came to life and depicted what Abner Little had just described. "How many citizens do you estimate will die?" asked T'Challa. 20 to 30% based on the WORLD3 computer's readings, replied Abner Little. T'Challa wished that he could kill off the entire Brotherhood, but that would take more than a lifetime to do. He also saw the disparity between the Brotherhood that governed the solar system and the members who still clung to the Earth. As for Abner Little, he was a gatekeeper to the inner Brotherhood because he could trace the ancestry of those seeking to become members. Lineage to the first kings of the Earth after the fall of Volusia was the prerequisite to become a member of the fraternity. 2 of the rings on Abner Little's fingers glowed and then he went into a trance-like state, then he returned to normal. Kissinger discovered the ruse. He said that we were petty, but he has a proposal for ending the Civil War. He wants a Wakanda-style challenge day for ultimate leadership of the Brotherhood, so it will be him versus all of us and winner takes all, said Abner Little. T'Challa saw an opening because he had a king from the era after the fall of Volusia living presently in Wakanda. Was the proposal accepted? Asked T'Challa. Of course it was, because since Kissinger took the bank for international settlements with him we have had to fend for scraps, replied Abner Little. Good, because I have a candidate for the inner Brotherhood, said T'Challa. There are no more unknown bloodlines, said Abner Little. You can examine him to verify his authenticity, said T'Challa. Chapter 3 Political Science was the section in the administrative campus that Didelaine frequented, and T'Challa met the Juggernaut there. Over 20,000 years ago, Didelaine the Diviner killed one of the worworms that mutated out of the earth and devoured entire settlements throughout the world after the fall of Volusia. 3 sharp spears were strapped to Didelaine's back and a tapestry of beads adorned his forearms while knives were on his belt. T'Challa assumed that he pored over political theories to rationalize why he knowingly allowed dissident citizens to kill him even though he was a benevolent king. I have a favor to ask, said T'Challa. Anything, because I cannot repay you and your sister enough for resurrecting me, said Didelaine. I need you face death again so that you can kill a man called Kissinger for me in ritual combat, said T'Challa. Why can't you do it? I was not born when the world was restarted, and being from that time is the prerequisite to enter the tournament, replied T'Challa. He then revealed the Brotherhood to Didelaine and the demigod agreed to help. T'Challa returned to Malta with Didelaine, where Calypso verified the ancient nature of the stranger. Abner Little was more discerning with his blood tests and references to relics in the Cecil Rhodes vault until Didelaine started calling out the relics by name in dead languages. See T'Challa, things like this is the reason I like having you as a friend, said Abner Little. Now get him into the tournament, said T'Challa. But if he wins then he takes control of everything, said Abner Little. Which would mean that you will get control of everything. That is why I like having you for a friend, said T'Challa. Later, the New Switzerland space station Kissinger reviewed the tape of the fight between White Wolf and the fake Black Panther. It was a fascinating display of martial arts, acrobatics, and the killer instinct until the fake Black Panther withered away. White Wolf said that the real T'Challa never repeated his threats, so when the fake Black Panther did it, the facade had been revealed. The event reinforced Kissinger's intent to sterilize the Brotherhood of the puerile nature that had overtaken it. He was happy that his Challenge Day proposal was accepted and he knew that he was going to win. T'Challa the Black Panther in The Great Bird of Zimbabwe Chapter 1 The 5S.H.I.E.L.D hell carriers anchored themselves in the sky above the island nation of Lulden on the request of its internationally recognized Prime Minister in order to quell the unrest in the wake of the illegitimate Prime Minister's assassination. Troopers and jets from the hell carriers patrolled the nation and they forcibly dealt with insurgents and terrorists. Meanwhile, in the midst of the chaos, a group of mercenaries on the north coast of the island dived to the depths of the Indian Ocean to reach the transnational communications cable that ran next to the island's maritime border. The team attached a device that inserted Ultron's source code into the cable. The code flowed along the cable to where the Bilderberg Island nation normally stole information wirelessly from the cable for espionage purposes. Traders within the cybernetic superpower nation and aligned to the Brotherhood allowed the Ultron code to germinate and grow quietly unnoticed in a secure data bank. Elsewhere, T'Challa attacked Abraham Hunter aka White Wolf with all his heart and mind as the two warriors clashed in the grave of a god commonly known as the Great Bird of Zimbabwe. In the background of the spiritual brothers' battle was another ferocious fight amongst the Brotherhood for the leadership mantle. T'Challa came to kill the Cabal and they intended to do the same to him before his proxy fighter could win the leadership. He expected resistance but not the level that White Wolf brought. Yet it gave the Black Panther satisfaction that these archaic men and women knew that their end had finally come. There were to be no more murders like the assassination of Lulden's rightful prime minister so that the Brotherhood could get a strategic foothold in which to unleash the insane super-artificial intelligence Ultron. Chapter 2 T'Challa leapt from the horn of the giant rhino statue that was made of solid gold. He intercepted White Wolf in mid-air and launched a flurry of knees into his ribs. Abraham stuck a disruptor bead on the Panther's shoulder. The device overloaded the kinetic energy absorption of the ceremonial war uniform. T'Challa fell and landed on his feet but ended up in front of Kissinger, who had strayed away from the battle for the leadership. "You should not have been allowed in here," said Kissinger from underneath his war helmet. T'Challa sprung at him and White Wolf jumped in front of Kissinger to protect him. "The stupidity of my brothers is astounding. They actually believe that they are going to kill your proxy and take his skull, so that is why you were allowed in here. Such a farce," said Kissinger. "After I am done here, the first thing on my agenda is to end the Ultron project. Earth is lost and my brothers will get used to that under my stewardship." T'Challa pushed White Wolf aside and he had a clear shot at Kissinger, but the man protected himself with his family crest, which formed a translucent wall between him and the Black Panther. T'Challa's energized claws shattered the crest and Kissinger swung his sword wildly. The rest of the Brotherhood's fight interrupted the duo. T'Challa's proxy fighter had reduced the combatants from 13 to 4. Kissinger ambushed the 4 swiftly and then it was just between him and T'Challa's fighter. "Your narrow-mindedness is the reason I wanted no direct conflict with Wakanda. I am telling you that I will take the Brotherhood from Earth, yet you still want to punish us," said Kissinger to T'Challa. "This is your last warning. Tell your fighter to stand down." Next story, The Sum of All Fears. T'Challa the Black Panther. In The Sum of All Fears Chapter 1, gold was illegal to own for personal use on Earth and in the solar system. Governments had draconian laws and enforcement practices were harsh to regularize the element. All the gold reverses were stored in the New Switzerland space station above the planet Neptune because of the unstableness of Earth, where reality warpers, global takeovers, and alien invasions were daily threats. Neptune was chosen to place New Switzerland because the planet had no atmosphere and its mantle was protected by veils of thick blue clouds and anomalies that were able to hide the space station when it descended into the planet whenever an alien armada came. Whoever controlled New Switzerland had power over mankind's money, as all the cryptocurrencies were backed by the gold bullion. Kissinger kept that in the back of his mind as he stood in the tomb of Ophir aka Jivaguru, the god of gold. Humans called the tomb the Great Bird of Zimbabwe, but to the Brotherhood that Kissinger belonged to, it was a source of power. Therefore it befitted the tournament to end the Brotherhood's civil war and produce its leader. T'Challa the Black Panther was the only thing in Kissinger's way to become that leader. One draw one kill was what Kissinger and T'Challa's proxy fighter were in the midst of. Both men held the hilts of their sheathed swords and waited for the other to make a mistake. The half-bird half-human features of Ophir that adorned the walls were slashed by the mystical weapons that Kissinger and his opponent used. Kissinger held a bone sword fashioned from the femur of a Nephilim, while the challenger carried short spears and swords that had cut open the all-consuming beast called Kamappa. Kissinger was amazed that T'Challa was able to find such a person to fight in the tournament, but Kissinger was also happy that once the challenger was killed there would be no more like him to fight in the next tournament. Chapter 2 T'Challa smelt the witnesses to the fight that were in the corners of the tomb. They were hidden in the shadows, and one in particular stood out to T'Challa because she wore a perfume from Yemen. She was one of the collectors that worked with Abner Little to populate the Cecil Rhodes vault and to provide weapons to the members of the Inner Brotherhood. Once T'Challa became de facto ruler of the Inner Brotherhood, he expected little resistance from the witnesses. However, it was the gods like Calypso that relied on the Brotherhood's regular blood sacrifices that T'Challa was concerned about. Those gods waited outside of the Great Bird of Zimbabwe to meet whoever was the champion. T'Challa intended to end the sacrifice tributes to those gods, and he knew that they would try to kill him because of that, but he had a plan. So far he was pleased that his fighter had seen through Kissinger's strategy of quick attacks followed by periods of evasions to tire out the fighter. The fighter had taken the one-draw-one-kill position that was 100 meters away from Kissinger. Being that the fighter was a demigod, the distance was not a problem for him to cover in one step. The problem was whether Kissinger would be able to evade the move. T'Challa suspected that Kissinger's bodyguard White Wolf was about to distract the Black Panther's fighter. "I will kill you the second you do it," said T'Challa to White Wolf, who was a couple of feet away from him. "Don't you think you have enough already? Wakanda, the Avengers, and now the Brotherhood, how much can you manage?" asked White Wolf. "All," replied T'Challa. "I will never work for you," said White Wolf. "Your presence was never required in the first place," said T'Challa. "What about the tributes to the gods, will you oversee that as well?" asked White Wolf. T'Challa noticed the witnesses had heard the question and had moved out of the shadows. "The Brotherhood will not last a day without the assistance of the gods," said White Wolf. "Your fears are noted," said T'Challa. "I fear nothing, just making an observation," said White Wolf. "Besides, you don't have the moral authority to judge us since you were in the group the superhuman community called the Illuminati." Chapter 3 Kissinger was dead when White Wolf finished his taunt. T'Challa's fighter ran his sword through the shield and armor of the New Switzerland's controller. White Wolf cursed and ran to the combatants, but it was too late and Kissinger fell onto the golden floor. The witnesses came completely out in the open and walked towards the body to examine it. White Wolf checked for vital signs, but there were none. By that time T'Challa heard the stirs of the gods that came through the doorway of the Great Bird of Zimbabwe. "Didelaine," said T'Challa. His fighter came to his side and was indeed worn down from the battle against 14 opponents. "By right of ritual combat, Didelaine takes full control of the resources of the Inner Brotherhood," said T'Challa. "It is the gold you are after," said White Wolf. "This was a gold heist from the start. Vibranium will be less valuable as humans move away from Earth, making Wakanda's value to mankind less, so to ensure that your country has continued power you need to take control of the bullion." "You are embarrassing yourself," said T'Challa. "Didelaine," said the female witness, "you rule the Earth and the solar system now, why do you need the Black Panther? You have more tangible power than him. Speak as a master and not as a puppet." Meanwhile the stirs from the gods intensified in T'Challa's ears. "We will settle this argument outside," said T'Challa. "No, because you will tell the gods to eat us as tributes." "I know how you think," said White Wolf. "You embarrass yourself even more," said T'Challa. "How will you purge us from the ranks then?" asked the woman. T'Challa walked towards the doorway with Didelaine and the two exited the tomb. They stepped into a clearing that was deep in the forest of the Switzerland nation on Earth. It was 1 in the morning and owls hooted wildly in the forest. The gods were not physically present but were in the spiritual realm. Next story, Motive T'Challa. The Black Panther. In Motive Chapter 1, during T'Challa's tenure as Black Panther, he signed a treaty with Odin, the king of Asgard. One of the clauses in the treaty gave Wakanda unfettered access to Asgardian territory. A Wakandan soul cutter ship took advantage of the clause when it appeared in Neo-Avalir to collect the Gleipnir. T'Challa received the news from the soul cutter ship over the Kale machine. He expected the ship to arrive shortly at his location, which was in the forested region of Switzerland, where ritualistic blood sacrifices were made by the Brotherhood to gods. A six-headed reptile emerged from the darkness of the night and it snaked up to T'Challa. Behind the serpent came a giant draped in animal skin. The last god that appeared had antlers, a cat face and tentacles for appendages. The giant lunged at T'Challa and the Black Panther's agility saved him from the blow. The Black Panther somersaulted forward and he barely missed the snapping mouths of the serpent. The appendages of the chimera passed by him like harpoons. In those few moments T'Challa had moved from the ground and into the top branches of a beech tree. The serpent lashed the tree with its tail and the tree toppled to the side. Suddenly the soul cutter ship broke through the spiritual barrier and T'Challa leapt from the falling tree and into the open holding bay door. The soldiers on the ship gave T'Challa the Gleipnir and the Black Panther went back into the fight. The three gods increased their speeds to catch him, but T'Challa eluded them by strategically outmaneuvering the attacks. All the while he managed to get the gods to stand close together. Then the Black Panther unspooled the Gleipnir around the dark gods and the mystical chain bounded the deities, which ended the fight. The goddess Calypso walked out of the spiritual realm. "I underestimated you," she said, and then faded into the darkness. Didelaine asked about the chain. "It was created by the dwarves of Asgard to hold the wolf Fenrir, a being more powerful than them," replied T'Challa. "Where is the wolf?" asked Didelaine. "Odin killed it," answered T'Challa. The dark gods struggled in vain and hurled insults at T'Challa because they were now trapped for eternity. Chapter 2 Wakanda. T'Challa expected the surviving dark gods to wait until his reign ended to restart the brotherhood that served them well for the millenniums. The bounding of the gods took years of building trust and patience with uncommon allies and with the citizens of Wakanda. He hoped that the next Black Panther would have the same fortune, but he would not make the same mistake as the Brotherhood. He called an emergency session of the Council of the Clans of Wakanda. Wakanda now controls indirectly the SHIELD organization, Hydra, and humanity's gold reserves, said T'Challa. "To what end?" asked a council member. "Multiple time travelers have said the same thing about the future of mankind. The Earth will be overtaken by the robots and humans will migrate fully to the nearby solar systems. The Avengers, SHIELD, and Hydra will continue to exist in various incarnations. Unless Wakanda finds a way to transport the vibranium mound into space, then the nation would be at a disadvantage 10,000 years from now. But by taking control of the two hands of power in the world, SHIELD and Hydra, along with the fortune that props them up, Wakanda will position itself to be in a safe place during those 10,000 years, replied T'Challa. "It sounds like you are overreaching and that you have little faith in the future Black Panthers," said another council member. "I make the decisions based on my assessment of the evidence before me. And speaking of future Black Panthers, I want to add a stipulation to the annual Challenge Day ritual," said T'Challa. The body languages of the council members changed in unison. "To avoid a puppet winning the tournament and becoming ruler of the land, I want every contestant oath tested," said T'Challa. "Anyone in breach of the oath will be considered a traitor to the nation and punished accordingly." "How do you test an oath?" they asked. "With a device that we will develop," replied T'Challa.